We're going to continue talking about the Opium Wars today. Last time we were talking about the Opium Wars, we talked about how Britain was buying a lot of tea from China. And as they were buying tea from China, it became a bit of a problem because China only accepted payment in the form of silver. Because of that, the British decided to get back their silver from China. They were going to then sell them opium. And the opium that they were selling them, opium, is a narcotic drug. So they're selling them this narcotic drug to get back their silver. As Britain bought more tea from China, they also sold more opium in China as well. Eventually, there was a big issue between the British and the Chinese. The Chinese stopped all trade with the British unless they refused to stop selling opium in China. The British then gave a year's worth of opium to the Chinese, which the Chinese then got rid of by throwing it in the ocean and dissolving it in the ocean. That then, the British were then looking for an excuse to declare war on the Chinese, which they did. So they regarded this as destruction of private property. Then they declared war on China, in which case the British then fought against the Chinese. This is a painting from the Opium Wars. So the British then fought against the Chinese, defeating them. And when they defeated them, they had them sign the Treaty of Nanking. Go ahead and make a bullet and write down Treaty of Nanking. So bullet, Treaty of Nanking. So the British had the Chinese sign the Treaty of Nanking. And in this treaty, what ends up happening is that the British got several things from China, things that you guys could probably already guess that they wanted. They wanted more silver, more tea, so very common things they wanted. So one of the first things that they end up getting is they end up getting a whole bunch of silver from the Chinese. They end up getting 21 million ounces of silver. Go ahead and make a number one and write down 21 million ounces of silver. So go ahead and write down 21 million ounces of silver for number one. So how much is 21 ounces in pounds? So 21 ounces, 2 pounds. After that, we have 1.3. So that's 1.3 million pounds of silver that was given to the British after the Treaty of Nanking was signed. Another thing that the British got as well, number two, ceded Hong Kong to the British. So China also ceded Hong Kong to the British. Ceded means give a piece of territory. When you say you're ceded something, you're ceding a piece of land to another nation. So that's what ceded means, when you give a piece of land to another nation. So that's going to be number two. We have played Hong Kong a couple of times. If you've been in class in person, we've been playing Hong Kong in a game called GeoGuessr, kind of exploring around. So we've seen the city of Hong Kong a couple of times, at least what it looks like modern days. But Hong Kong nowadays is a pretty modern city. You know, it looks pretty much just like any American city, except a lot of the buildings do look very similar, and there are a whole bunch of tall buildings in the area. And in Hong Kong, even nowadays, even though Hong Kong is in southern China, and they speak Cantonese in southern China, the city of Hong Kong speaks both English and Cantonese. So as we look around in Hong Kong, you can see signs there of both in English and in Cantonese, because in 1843, after the Opium War, the city of Hong Kong is given to the British. And then, of course, the British obviously speak English. So obviously there's people in the area that can speak English as well. So the British got a city. They also got more ports were open to trade, Canton, Amrei, Fuzhou, Ningbo, and Shanghai. Those cities were also open to trade. By opening up more cities that the British could buy stuff in, that allowed them to then buy more tea. So more cities, more places where they could buy tea at. So that's how they got more tea. So they weren't just giving tea for free. They were just giving more places where they could buy tea, and that allowed them then to acquire more. Next thing, number three, extraterritoriality for British citizens on Chinese soil. So go ahead and make it 3. Extraterritoriality for British citizens on Chinese soil. All right, so what is extraterritoriality? We talked about this before. We talked about this word actually when we were talking about Japan and about how after Matthew Perry showed up in 1853 at Tokyo Harbor with his steam warships, we talked about how when Japan signed a treaty with him, they gave American citizens extraterritoriality. So once again, extraterritoriality is when if you commit a crime there, so if I'm a British citizen, so British citizens had extraterritoriality in China. So if I was a British citizen and I went to China, and if I committed a crime, so let's say I stabbed someone who was Chinese, I could be arrested in China. However, I would have to be then sent back to Britain for trial. So if I committed a crime in China and I was a British citizen, I couldn't actually be held for the crime in China. Instead, you had to be sent back to Britain, and then you had to have a trial there for the crime committed. So that's what extraterritoriality means. So we're going to write down extraterritoriality for number 4. So make it 4 and write down extraterritoriality. And then equal sign. So 4, extraterritoriality, equal sign. And then the simplest way to think about it, only British can punish British. So that's the simplest way to think about it. So 4, extraterritorial, equal sign, only British can punish British. So that's basically kind of what extraterritoriality means. Okay. Now, the opium trade issue was still kind of unresolved. So the Treaty of Nanking did leave some things unresolved, such as what exactly was the legality of the opium trade. So the United States, for example, couldn't trade opium with China, but like the British were allowed to. So there were some unresolved issues. All right, new bullet. Second Opium War, 1856 to 1860. So Second Opium War, 1856 to 1860. Now, the Second Opium War is also known as the Arrow War. What happens, or how the Second Opium War gets going, is that there's a boat. It's called the Arrow. And this boat, the Arrow, has been sailing around and it's been attacking other boats in the area. And it's also been smuggling opium as well. So they're smuggling opium and they're attacking other boats in the area. So it's kind of become an issue. However, the Arrow is a British registered ship. So even though everybody on the ship is a Chinese citizen, the Arrow is flying a British flag and it's registered as a boat with the British. Go ahead and make a 1. And we're going to write down 1 Arrow and then equal sign British registered. I'm going to write down British registered ship for number 1. So 1 Arrow British registered ship. So the Arrow is a British registered ship, even though it's everyone on board is Chinese, but the flag is flying is a British flag. So what ends up happening is eventually the Chinese government captures everyone on board the Arrow and accuses them of, being pirates and smuggling opium because, they were. So they do get arrested. Make it 2. Crew was accused of piracy and smuggling. 2 crew was accused of piracy and smuggling. So they end up getting arrested. And after they end up getting arrested, the British government then complains because the British government is like, whoa, whoa, whoa. They were flying the British flag, and therefore they have extraterritoriality. They can't be punished by China. They have to be sent to Britain for punishment. But the Chinese government was like, no, they're Chinese citizens. That doesn't matter. But the British decided, well, we're looking for an excuse anyways to go to war with you guys again because we want more stuff for you. So they declared war on them again. So the Second Opium War, that's how it kind of gets going. Britain again declares war on China. Now the war is delayed by pretty much a year because there were some other issues going on. At the time period in India, there's a big mutiny, a big rebellion going on in India, which, remember, the Britain controlled India at this time period. So East India Company was putting up with this rebellion. The British government had to send troops to actually put down the rebellion going on in India. Go ahead and make a 3 and write down war delayed by the Taiping Rebellion and the Indian Mutiny. I'll talk about the Taiping Rebellion here in a sec. So 3, war delayed by Taiping Rebellion and Indian Mutiny. So in India, as I said, there was a big mutiny going on, a big rebellion against the British government, or not British government, against the East India Company, which was in control of India. And the British government has to get directly involved in India to stop the rebellion. Once the British government gets involved directly with stopping the rebellion, what ends up happening is that the British government then takes over full control over India. So India gets under full control of the British government. So the East India Company is no longer in control of India. Now it will be the British government directly in charge. The Taiping Rebellion was a rebellion, a communist rebellion in the north central parts of China. So in like north central part of China, there was then this rebellion by Chinese citizens against the government. It was a communist rebellion. And eventually the communist rebellion is put down by the Chinese government. So war was kind of delayed because both sides were kind of busy putting down rebellions that they were having to deal with. So even though war is declared, it doesn't really get started until like 1858, and then the war gets going. So it's like 2 years in. And in the Opium War, Britain this time isn't just, going around attacking cities, coastal cities by itself. Instead, there's a couple of people that show up too because they want that sweet opium money as well. One of those people being the United States. Go ahead and make a 4. Aided by allies, the United States, Russia, and France. So as I said kind of before, there was still this confusion about if the United States could sell opium or not in China. And the United States was like, well, we want some opium money too. So the United States got involved with this as well. So 4 is aided by allies, United States, Russia, and France. And very much the same things happened in the Second Opium War as in the First Opium War. The British, along with the United States, Russia, and France, stick to the waterways where they have an advantage over the Chinese. So they stick to the coastlines, they stick to the oceans, the rivers, where they can easily kind of move their troops around, attack cities, and also destroy the Chinese boats super easily as well because their cannons they had were better, they had better ships. So they're able to control the waterways pretty easily and eventually force China into a situation in which they have to give up. This then leads us to the Treaty of Tientsin, also called kind of the Unfair Treaty, which we will talk about next time.